Listening, fill in the blanks.
Let's start.
One of the buildings, now known as House 7, is intriguingly different from the others. This building is detached from the others, and has a door which door could only be secured from the outside, suggesting that the house may have served as a type of jail, an unusual necessity in a village of less than 100 people. House 8 is also unique, having none of the furnishings of the other houses. Excavators have found that the floor of the building is littered with fragments from the manufacture of tools, suggesting that the room was a workshop.
The standardized house design has led some to believe that there was no hierarchy of rank within the settlement, and that all villagers were equal. Whether or not this is true is debatable. However, it is likely that life here was probably quite comfortable for the Neolithic people. The villagers kept sheep and cattle, and grew wheat and barley. They probably traded these commodities for pottery. They would have hunted red deer and boar for their meat and skins. They would also have consumed fish, seal and whale meat, and the eggs of seabirds. The skin and bones of these animals would have provided tools such as needles and knives. Flint for cutting tools would have been traded or gathered from the shore. Fuel probably came from seaweed, making the inside of the dwelling smoky and probably smelly. Driftwood was probably too valuable to burn.
Prompted by the oil crises of the 1970s, a wind power industry flourished briefly in the United States. But then world oil prices dropped, and funding for research into renewable energy was cut. By the mid-1980s, U.S. interest in wind energy, as a large-scale source of energy, had almost disappeared. The development of wind power at this time suffered not only from badly designed equipment, but also from poor long-term planning, economic projections that were too optimistic, and the difficulty of finding suitable locations for the wind turbines. Only now are technological advances beginning to offer hope that wind power will come to be accepted as a reliable and important source of electricity. There have been significant successes in California, in particular, where wind farms now have a capacity of 1,500 megawatts, comparable to a large nuclear or fossil-fueled power station, and produce 1.5% of the state's electricity.
The pressure to transform our institutions of learning continues. Virtually every enterprise and institution is grappling with the disruptions and opportunities caused by web-enabled infrastructures and practices. New best practices, business models, innovations, and strategies are emerging, including new ways to acquire, assimilate, and share knowledge. Using technologies that are already developed or that will be deployed over the next 5 years, best practices in knowledge sharing not only are diffusing rapidly but will be substantially reinvented in all settings: educational institutions, corporations, government organizations, associations, and non-profits. But institutions of learning are in a unique position to benefit from an added opportunity, providing leadership in e-knowledge.
Demographic trends are incredibly easy to predict. Decades pass between the birth of children and their growth into adulthood, while rises in life expectancy due to affluence and better medical care are gradual. Consequently, it is possible to predict accurately what proportion of the population will be economically active, and what proportion will be dependent for a considerable time in the future. Hence, we know that rising as people are living longer, and having fewer children, and having them later in life, population structure will skew much more towards the aged. Statistical prediction is one thing. Predicting the implications of such trends on society is another thing entirely. In the 1900s, demographers could, or at least should have predicted that trend towards city living as opposed to country living was likely to continue, as indeed it did, becoming one of the most defining features of the 20th century. The political, economic, social and environmental implications of this shift were much harder to predict, however.
Consequently, the social mix of students at the top universities remains sadly biased towards the rich and privately educated, although thanks to increasing numbers of bursaries providing free private school education to academically gifted youngsters, it is possible to be one without the other. Even so, the fact is that 7% of British children go to private schools, while more than 40% of the intake at Oxford and Cambridge is privately educated, and this statistic depicts a worryingly skewed trend. The proportion matters because, although there are obviously plenty of other universities offering excellent study programs, an Oxbridge or Ivy League degree undoubtedly enhances employability in the ruling professions.
The genome of the polar bear may also provide the solution for another condition, one that particularly affects our older generation, osteoporosis. This is a disease where bones show reduced density, usually caused by insufficient exercise, reduced calcium intake or food starvation. Bone tissue is constantly being remodeled, meaning that bone is added or removed, depending on nutrient availability and the stress that the bone is under. Female polar bears, however, undergo extreme conditions during every pregnancy. Once autumn comes around, these females will dig maternity dens in the snow and will remain there throughout the winter, both before and after the birth of their cubs. This process results in about 6 months of fasting, where the female bears have to keep themselves and their cubs alive, depleting their own calcium and calorie reserves. Despite this, their bones remain strong and dense.
Tickling is caused by a light sensation across our skin. At times the light sensation can cause itching, however, most of the time it causes giggling. If a feather is gently moved across the surface of the skin, it can also cause tickling and giggling. Heavy laughter is caused by someone or something placing repeated pressure on a person and tickling a particular area. The spots tickled often are feet, toes, sides, underarms, and neck, which cause a great deal of laughter. An institute has found that tickling sensations involve signals from nerve fibers. These nerve fibers are associated with pain and touch. Also, Zoterman has discovered tickling sensations to be associated not only with nerve fibers but also with sense of touch, because people who have lost pain sensations still laugh when tickled. But really, why do we laugh? Why are we not able to tickle ourselves? What part of the brain is responsible for laughter and humor? Why do we say some people have no sense of humor?
Polar bears are being increasingly threatened by the effects of climate change, but their disappearance could have far-reaching consequences. They are uniquely adapted to the extreme conditions of the Arctic Circle, where temperatures can reach -40 degrees Celsius. One reason for this is that they have up to 11 centimeters of fat underneath their skin. Humans with comparative levels of adipose tissue would be considered obese and would be likely to suffer from diabetes and heart disease. Yet the polar bear experiences no such consequences.
Like, share, subscribe the channel, and press the bell icon for further updates.